Thank you for joining Revenue Engine Masters Podcast of the Month, in which CROs, marketing ops, sales ops, revenue ops leaders discuss how they're building future-proof go-to-market strategies, they're optimizing their systems and their go-to-market data and processes to drive sales efficiency, velocity, and consistent and sustainable revenue growth. Specifically, how they're investing in and adopting and layering in AI to achieve those goals and gains. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with a friend, a ScaleStack customer, trailblazer, Kristen Habacht. She's the CRO, the Chief Revenue Officer at Typeform, formerly President and COO of Shogun, Head of Sales at Atlassian. You're a board member on many well-known SaaS companies, and you're also a part of the expert network or operating network at a couple emerging funds. So I just said a lot, a mouthful. Kristen, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Before we get into some of our topics, I'd love for the audience to get to know you a bit. You have a really impressive background, and tell us where you're from and the path that led you to where you are today as a CRO of a PLG company.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like telling this story because when I was a kid, my parents were not in like corporate America, and I would like drive past office buildings and be like, what is it that all those people do? Like, I don't understand it. So I say that because I didn't set out to be a CRO. I don't think too many people do. But I kind of stumbled into it by chance. I was an office manager. And the CEO came to me and was like, hey, listen, you should be doing something else. And you can either go into our finance team or you can go into our sales team. Both of those leaders are interested in having you. What would you want to do? And I was like, man, I hope no one finds out how bad at math I am. So like probably finance is not the one I should pick. So I picked sales. And that was it, right? That's then the whole career kind of came in from that place. And I think because I didn't have any sense of what I should and shouldn't be doing, like they gave me the absolute worst accounts and I didn't realize that. And so I was like, oh yeah. And like, I just went after it. And I think everyone was really confused by my enthusiasm. And so I like hit all these numbers and I was doing great. And I kind of just like grew from there. And built my career out in sales from there. So then I ended up joining, a company called Fog Creek Software, which ended up being the company that then spun out such companies as Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow, Trello, and of course, Fog Creek's business itself. And so I was in a very PLG space there. Joel Spolsky was like a thought leader in engineering, and he really felt like salespeople were this like unnecessary evil, like we just shouldn't have them. And he had built this whole philosophy really around people being able to buy without having to talk to salespeople because engineers don't want to talk to salespeople. And I think and I love these guys, I think they half-heartedly hired me and a couple other people just to prove that we really didn't need salespeople, but we did okay. We did all right for ourselves. And that was the beginning of my PLG journey, which was basically, trying to only be in the places where a human was the most valuable person and otherwise getting out of the way of the customer journey for everybody else. And so Fog Creek and then Trello and then Atlassian, Shogun, now Typeform, all kind of mirror that philosophy of we're not an unnecessary evil and we're not a necessary evil. We are a valuable part of the journey, but we should be in the right places in the journey so that we provide that value to our customers. So yeah, that's my little ramble of how I got here and why I'm doing it.
Oh man, my mom was a massage therapist. My dad was a landscape architect who never went to school for it. So that resonates with me. I didn't even know what CEO was, and that acronym meant, until I was 23, shamelessly. But that's great. I told salespeople are expensive, right? And so, where do we need to be? Where's the most actionable and valuable moment where we can be to help our customers and guide them through our journey? That's great. Describe Typeform's solutions, what your ideal customer profiles are, and your high fit buyer personas for context.
Yeah. So if people aren't familiar with Typeform, we basically have this really lovely conversational way of getting information from people directly at the end of the day, right? Whether it's a form or a survey or whatever it is, at the end of the day, we ask a question and we get information directly from our customers. or our leads or our prospects or whatever it is in a really delightful, engaging way. And Typeform is a product-led growth company, meaning that the vast majority of our customer base never has an interaction with a salesperson, probably a customer success person, hopefully not even a support person, because everything sort of just works. What that means is that we are a very horizontal tool. We have people who are using us. Just the other day, I got a survey from my town. And now anytime I see a survey, I click it anyway, just to see who they're using. And they happen to be using a Typeform to kind of survey what we should do with the playground in town. So we have those kind of use cases, and then we have everything in between. But at the core, our ICP from a paid and enterprise acquisition is mid-market marketers who are using Typeform for customer acquisition or customer engagement, somewhere on that revenue chain. Now, there's other use cases, but that's kind of the ICP that we would want to be talking to.
Wonderful. Yeah, you can go onto typeform.com and contact sales and get that experience firsthand right on your website, which is really great. So Typeform for Typeform is really great.
That's right.
Yeah. So thinking about a PLG company, you have self-serve, you have a partner channel, you're serving a wide spectrum of different customers. Talk to me about your go-to-market stack and how your team is organized.
Yeah. So as CRO, I'm responsible for all of the revenue, not just the sales revenue. So we obviously have our marketing, our customer success, all of those teams. So I am responsible for all of our self-serve funnel and our enterprise and sales funnel, which I think is really important to kind of look at those things holistically and not as separate segments. So we have obviously a really robust tech stack in terms of what our marketing team is using, whether they're using, iterable and the ways that we're looking at, data tracking with like Looker and all these other pieces that we're using. We use Salesforce, we use those tools. And then on the sales side, again, like we have our Salesforce tool, we have Catalyst on our customer success end. And then we have, a million little things in between, including like Gong and Sales Loft and other tools in that as well. So we could spend a long time talking about everything in my tech stack, but it's a fairly large tech stack for a fairly small team. We have about 8 AEs and we have 8 customer success people. And so what that tech stack really is in service of, for the most part, is that self-serve funnel, because that's where the majority of that, we have 150,000 customers. So that's where the majority of those customers are coming from. 8 people are not closing 150,000 deals, obviously.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
Cool. So you have a very small sales team and customer success team, and the majority of your customers are coming inbound and self-serving. That's fantastic to hear. That's really difficult to achieve in product. Kim, your CEO, has been on a roadshow lately, and he's been introducing Typeform's one funnel concept at SaaS Doc, SaaS Open, the CRO Summit, and more. As the CRO of a PLG company, describe what one funnel means and means to you specifically in your role.
Yeah. I mean, first, I think it goes back to what I just said, which is that idea of looking at your self-serve and your sales-led and your customer success and thinking about those all as one part of one funnel. And I think where I've been before, especially if it's not all under one revenue leader, is, someone's like, well, I own the marketing funnel and that's just the self-serve funnel. And I own the MQL funnel and that's just the funnel to get the sales leads. And they don't necessarily talk to each other. They don't even oftentimes use the same criteria, right? Well, this is a PQL, but this is our health score data on our customer success. Well, that should be indicating if a tool is being used and if there's room for expansion. But isn't that just really what a PQL is also measuring? So why do these two things look so fundamentally different? So it's a combination of tooling and trying to look at everything in one place as possible. It's a combination of terminology. Like in my world, a PQL and a health score are extensions of the same thing, not two completely different definitions. And then it's also, I think, just an alignment piece, which is shared goals, shared KPIs across product sales, marketing, success, as much partnerships, as much as possible. And I think there's some of this you can do with tools. There's some of this you have to do with culture. But at the end of the day, the product is a core part of my funnel. It's a core part of my marketing funnel. And my marketing funnel is a core part of products funnel as well. And so there is very easily, and I've lived this a million times, where, we own a sign up number, but product owns an activation number. Why aren't we both sharing some ownership of both of those, right? If the tool can have more a viral component to it that encourages additional shared signups, it should. If I can own pieces that help people in activation, we should. And you might still have a core owner that is product for that and marketing for this, but there are shared goals that my CPO and I both have around those things. And so it's also kind of building that culture of, we're doing this thing together. We don't have these separate funnels. We don't have separate insights into these customers. Everything we know about our customers should be shared at every phase.
That's music to my ears. We teach our sales team, speak the language of your customers, use your customer words to drive consensus, on a dysfunctional buying committee. It's like when you do annual planning, when you adopt a revenue framework, the goal is to speak the common lexicon, the common language about what is a deal, what isn't a deal, what are the stages and steps, what are those customer verifiable outcomes. But if you're doing annual planning and top-down waterfall modeling, it starts with a legend. It starts with, what does PQL mean? What are our shared goals? That's really refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
I just wonder why more companies don't do this, because it makes sense,
Yeah. I think it's hard, right? I think it's hard. And I think there's no end state where you're like, we did it, guys. And everyone starts shaking hands and like, we hit it. But I think, because there's no clear end state, I think because it's hard. I also think, now I'm not a psychiatrist or whatever, but it's like, I think humans also, they like to put things into categories. This is the marketing funnel. This is the product funnel. And it helps us, right? I don't know how much you've seen this, but like people always want to know, like, well, what's the swim lane of that person? What's the swim lane of this project? And listen, I'm not saying like no swim lanes, everybody go slamming into everybody everywhere you want. But sometimes our push for that concept of like, what is my lane so that I don't leave my lane? It is in service of clarity, but it actually hampers this other concept that we're talking about in terms of that collaboration. And I think that's a very delicate balance to strike, giving people clarity of what they're working on, but not having it be so rigid that they don't step outside. Because a swim lane is rigid. You should not go into the other swimmer's lane. That's the whole point of it. And I think the more we've pushed for those pieces of clarity, the more conceptually we want this thing, but then in execution, we can't get there because we've structured it in a completely different way.
What was happening in Typeform's business that catalyzed this change in thought? I mean, maybe it has never changed. Maybe it's just articulated more effectively as one funnel, unified go-to-market.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it was fully right before I joined. And I think I say this with like, everyone works hard and does a great job. And, I don't like to look back and say why it was or wasn't working, right? Very easy to armchair quarterback somebody else's stuff. But at the end of the day, I do think, and this will maybe be a little controversial, but I do think, especially in PLG companies, revenue needs to be a centralized owner of sales and marketing. I think having a marketing leader and a revenue leader that are, whether it's centralized leadership or at least really strong cross-functional leadership that's ultimately marching towards the same goal, is just too fuzzy in PLG, in my opinion, for those lines to be that strict. And so I think some of it was that, right? I think some of it comes from that. I think that, the world is changing in a way where, at least when I started out, right, 20 years ago, there was no really, I didn't at least see it, RevOps function. And certainly, even if there was RevOps function, maybe it was literally just the ops component. They weren't owning tooling. IT still owned centralized tooling. And then I think we've seen that slowly change over time to the point where a RevOps leader who has a revenue goal and a revenue initiative and a revenue vision can also now be in control of what tools they're buying, how those tools are talking together, how those tools are in service, without maybe necessarily needing IT to be involved in that. That is a change over the last call it probably 10 years that I've seen, even more recent than that with some of this. And so I think it's a combination of all of those pieces of like bringing revenue together under an umbrella. Then you can have all that intent you want, but if the tools aren't set up to do that, or if this person bought this thing and it doesn't speak to this thing, good luck, it won't matter, right? And so I think it's all those things coming together, and that's what we've been establishing. And it wasn't like none of it was there, but I think it's just like a continuous process that needs to be worked through.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Getting back to the One Funnel initiative and the roadshow that Kim's on, and you're going to be on very soon.
Yeah.
There's this quote I think was posted today or maybe yesterday. He said, "History teaches us that most worthwhile human endeavors require the strength of a unified team, because the team elevates every individual." And when I think about the value chain of the customer for Typeform, it doesn't begin with Typeform, and it doesn't begin with the marketer. It begins with that end user experience on a website, or taking that survey and engaging with a dynamic and interactive form, a Typeform. And what tactically needed to change in your systems design, maybe your data decisions, those signals to provide each stakeholder in that buyer journey the best experience to optimize for conversion, whether they talk to a human or not?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the tooling has been a huge component of this, right? I mean, we would have stuff sitting in our email systems or in our data warehouses that we didn't have insight in, that wasn't being passed into Salesforce for teams to action on, or Catalyst, to see what was working and what was not working, to be able to say, hey, product is launching this feature because they think this is a feature the ICP will use, and da, 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 da. But then actually being able to let the customer success or the sales or even the marketing team be able to see if customers were actually going in and adopting that. And if not, being a partner and saying like, hey, you signed up and said you were using us for customer acquisition. I imagine that means you care deeply about your brand. Just curious why you haven't turned on Brand Kit that allow, and it sounds like it should happen by default, right? But I think sometimes, especially when you've come from a very PLG perspective, there is a little bit of a flawed line of thought, which is like, if I put it in the product, it will come, right? People will find it on their own. And this is where that unified team can work together, which is like, you put out a feature, the feature is great. Some people will find the feature. Some people will not find the feature. Can we help you help people find the feature? And then, by the way, some people will find the feature and they won't figure out how to use it right, or correctly, or whatever, right? Can we help you find the people who have found the feature, who have stopped using the feature, to see if they can ring it? And it's like, that's the teamwork of a GTM engine, I think, especially in a PLG motion. But that means a lot of pieces have to talk together. And again, it's like, that's hard. So I think culturally, you have to agree that we're going to help each other on this goal. I'm going to help you get product adoption on this feature, because if we get product adoption on this feature, it will help my revenue retention number, right? It's not like I'm just doing it to be kind. I am kind, but it has a goal on the GTM side too. So what does that mean? Well, you have to send these product signals in a database structure somehow into a place where the team can action it. And by the way, here's another human thing, right? It can be in Looker. And if the answer is you go into Looker and pull that report every day, no one's going to do it. Like, they're just not. Like, maybe unless a manager is sitting on them checking it, they're not. And so it's like, you can't rely on people pulling the data. There's also this element of the data has to be pushed out to the people to be able to leverage, which is a whole other. So maybe you get the insights, but then it's like, how do you get the insights proactively into people's hands? So yeah, there's a lot of motions there to work as one team. Like, it's great philosophically to talk about working as one team, but like, again, it comes back to like, it's hard.
It's hard. So it's hard. It really is hard. I was going to ask you about what are the jobs to be done to achieve a unified go-to-market, and then I'm thinking about it. I'm like, that's a lame question. If you could break it down into 3 horizons.
Yeah.
Like short term, and then like getting up to leapfrogs.
Yeah.
That somebody could take away from this and say, oh my God, this is actionable for me, right?
Yeah. The very first thing that we did, when I think about Alex, who's our chief product officer, and I did, right? Again, forget like the systems and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we sat down and we first agreed that we were going to just do this together. Like, and I know that's a simple thing, but like we kind of made a contract with one another and that we were going to both go out and in our teams instill a sense of customer centricity. And we were that was our first goal, right? Which was just to have customer centricity. And so we both agreed on that we would go and this would be a cultural thing we would create in both of our teams. And then we said, all right, what things will help create that, right? And so that's where we looked at goaling. But one of the biggest initiatives we kicked off, and you can do this without tooling, right, is that we spun up what we call a customer sync meeting. It's every month, and it is on 1 month. So say month one, it's all GTM insights, like top features requested, top close loss, close won reasons, feedback, whatever it is. So it's a combination of customer success support, which by the way, support is a critical part of your GTM team, marketing insights, and we do that. Product is there to ingest that information. They listen, they ask questions, they have whatever. They then take the action items after that meeting. And then the next month is their meeting. And it's like a call and response. So then the next month they say, here's all the things we heard from you. Here's what we're doing with it. Here's what's going to make it onto the roadmap. Here's what's not. Here's what we need more information on. Here are the customers we'd like to talk to get, that you mentioned that we'd like to get more insights from. And so then that month is the month where the GTM teams are listening and taking the out. And so you do that rotation and it becomes with a meeting, a conversation, like the conversation obviously in the meeting, but the meeting structure itself mirrors a conversation. Everyone is taking their turn talking. And by the way, everybody has co-ownership of that, right? This month's mine, next month's yours. This month's mine, next month's yours. You don't need any special tooling to set that up. So that's something you could do right now, right? That's a very actionable item right now.
That's cool.
I think then after that, then you start to think like, well, what you learn from where do you want to start connecting those pieces? Those are then those kind of 3-6 month projects, because that's not something you can do overnight, right? So even on that meeting, we were like, it would be great if we had a tool that could do this so it's not so manual. And then we ended up purchasing a tool called Canny to provide these insights. And but like we ran that meeting for months before that tool got purchased. So it's like it doesn't have to all just be tooling and system, though certainly that's the thing then that usually unblocks the next step for you.
So it was the covenant around the mission of customer centricity, then the shared goals, and then that call response. I love that. Hey, ho, hey.
Yeah, exactly.
And the tooling came out of that meeting, and the roadmap comes out of that meeting.
Yeah,
right. Lined around one mission, that common language. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the other thing that I've often found. I don't know if you've seen this, is like a lot of times GTM teams are like, why is this stuff on the roadmap? Like, and why isn't this stuff I asked for on the roadmap? And I think having it so that you're not waiting for that roadmap presentation to see it, like you're basically building the roadmap together to some extent. You then ideally get to the point too, where when we go and say what's coming in the next quarter or the second half of the year, it's really not a surprise because we were building it together that whole time. I know we really wanted this thing. I know why you explained it's not possible. I've been brought along on the journey. And of course, this doesn't scale for every size company. Not everyone on our teams are on these calls. Like there's a responsibility of people who are on it to translate it. We record it for people to watch, things like that. But it's also just that like building together motion that's super important.
Oh my gosh. I've had conversations. I'm just recalling conversations with my sales reps. We're like, why is that on the roadmap? And why isn't this? And I'm like, well, number one, we have the wrong pick list for close lost reasons or close won reasons. Nobody's talking to the like our customers to actually get, the source of truth. We need to think like product, managers and solutions engineers and give people context and then quantify like the context behind the feature, the must-have, and then quantify the value of this given feature, functionality, or this leap.
Exactly. But I think for what it's worth on that, right? I think that's the other part that's super important, which is you'll never have enough data. You know what I mean? You'll never have enough close loss reasons. You'll never have good enough. And so I think there's also on the other side, that is our job as GTM to collect as much as we can. There's also the flip side, which is product's job is to be okay with not 100% certainty in those insights, right? And again, like that's that partnership that needs to happen where like, I won't have everything perfect. You won't need everything perfect. And we will have to, and by the way, you won't give us the perfect roadmap. We're going to sell without the perfect, like there has to be that level of we're all still in a human system where there's trade-offs of the things and we have to be okay with that. And I think that as much as you can build it together, thinking about it in one journey, thinking about it from a customer centricity perspective, there has to also be some grace. Just like we won't get everything and we won't get everything built. We're okay with that.
Yeah. You talked about, use the words like next best action, actioning, insights, signals. I have like scar tissue at every company I've been at. I've created this problem where, for a sales assist motion, my team are like bouncing around between systems, trying to connect the dots, and it's too much of a cognitive load for most humans to be able to connect the dots with the signals and then reach out with intentionality and what's in it for you and give your customer a guided experience. What are you doing to connect those dots for your team and give them the context that matters for the highest propensity accounts that really want and need to talk to a human?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're still very much on this journey. And I think this is a good example of one that's like, I'm not sure it's ever done, right? Because by the time you connect all these pieces, there's some new cool thing that gives you some new cool piece of insight that you wish you could connect into all those pieces. And so there's, I think, probably good job security out there for all those RevOps systems people. But I think this is where I think some AI stuff is really interesting, right? That concept of like pulling insights instead of having it to be, or pushing insights instead of having to pull it. Like if you can get enrichment or if you can get lead scoring or if you can get whatever it is, because you can use a tool that can quickly pull what we know about them from LinkedIn and this place and what we know about our internal stuff. I mean, I think that's huge for my team in a world where we are being asked to run, and I think it's not just my team. I think all GTM leaders are being asked to run in a more efficient universe right now. The answer is probably less leads that are better instead of dumping tons of leads that people can't get through. And so the only way you can do that is to get as many triggers in part of that decision-making process as possible to route down to the team. And so we've been on this like constant struggle, or I would say opportunity journey, to get, the best leads in front of the team, but also, by the way, not just the best and probably the tier under that. Cause again, if all they want to do is just hand you money, like you're still a salesperson, you should still be able to like do a little bit of convincing. So it's like those tier 1, tier 2 leads should at least be coming through. Tier 3 and below, like don't send them, right? I think at that point, that's where the opportunity lies. And so pulling together product insights, historical insights, external third-party insights, combining that with things like what Typeform does, which is also getting that zero party, like I know directly from you why you're here because I asked that as part of the onboarding journey, pulling all those things together and then hopefully pushing that to the sales team is the ideal state. And I think AI is going to play a big part in that.
Right on. So are you evaluating AI or are you layering an AI in your stack to go pull all those signals from product, from external sort like data providers on top of your stack? And like, what are some of the signals that matter for you in Typeform that your sales team says, cool, this makes sense to me. I can action on it and I can give my customer prospects a guided experience.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely layering in AI. I think for me as a leader, my preference with layering in AI has been around exactly that, which is the data collection and the things that I think people are just not as fundamentally good at doing. Like I can know I should go look in these 3 places. Will I look every single time? Probably not. Like we just know what human nature is. And we also, I think, would say looking at lots of unstructured data, even looking at lots of structured data is still really hard for people, for your average salesperson, your average RevOps person necessarily to do. And so I think that's the places AI is going to be valuable for us. I'm using it. I personally, maybe some of the team might be doing other things, but I personally have not bought anything for the team that helps them write messages or send emails out like that. I still think the value is to make things easier to understand for the person, but to still have the person do the communication. So that's important to me still at this point. maybe AI will advance and I won't feel that way forever. But for now, humans still do the communicating. And so, yeah, we're layering it in. I think just also it's still new. Like, I think it's still just trying to figure out where it's going to be the best use case at. But I think for things like lead scoring, for enrichment,
Yeah.
for prioritization, that I think is where AI is going to be really valuable for us.
Cool. Prioritization, lead scoring. I love it. Since you've considered that and started adopting some AI tools for lead scoring, prioritization, I think about the sales velocity formula. Those are like things within my control, and like the transactional reps were like, I want more at bats, and then the enterprise reps were like, I need 10 accounts and I'm going to dive super deep. And
Yeah.
And so if you're prioritizing the highest propensity accounts, how has that affected the sales velocity formula? Opportunities times win rate times divided by sales cycle, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've definitely been sending less through to the team and seeing a much higher close rate. We've been at quota attainment, at least through Q1. We're still in Q2, so we're working through it. But I think we're seeing that improvement. But I also think there's just been a mental toll on the team that we know has been improved, of people being like, it was a lot and not all of it was good. And it was hard to know what was good and what wasn't good, or what was even moderately good. And so the team was just spending a lot of time. And when you spend a lot of time on things you know are not going to be particularly valuable, it impacts the rest of it too, right? Because it's not like you're saving your energy to be enthusiastic for the 25 leads while you're trying to just knock the other 250 out because you have to do it. You're treating everything that way. And so we've seen a huge improvement in giving the team less, and letting them really work thoughtfully on those. Like, to write 25 thoughtful, personalized emails is a lot easier than writing 250. And we follow this philosophy, by the way. Again, if you want to think about it from a one funnel perspective, not just through sales engagement, but this is also like how we're thinking about things on the product side. We actually have deprecated a number of integrations because we only have so many resources. The team can only work to make these integrations better at so many times. And so instead of being, a mile wide and an inch deep, we've made this choice to go the opposite way, right? And so from product all the way to marketing to GTM, we've made this decision and how we're thinking about, again, customer centricity and who we want to have these conversations with and what their experience should be.
Love it. When you talked about prioritizing or enriching and scoring your leads, like, what were your considerations? What were your requirements that our audience at PLG companies could take away from that?
Yeah, and I think for PLG specifically, and I think this is sort of unique to us, is that we get a lot of non-business users, right? And so we have a decently huge volume of people who come in with their Gmails or whatever, who are sometimes buying, like oftentimes they're buying, but they're buying like a prosumer, right? And so that buying signal is not enough. The Gmail email is not enough, right? But so it's like they should buy. We shouldn't interrupt their journey. Again, customer centricity, like you should be able to do what you're doing. It doesn't mean I should put a salesperson against trying to talk to you. It doesn't make any sense. Like, you're coordinating like a high school reunion. Like, you don't need a salesperson to explain it to you. It doesn't mean you don't need the tool. So I think like we have this unique problem where we have this opportunity, where we have this high group of people who potentially are not the right users. And then even when you get into the B2B or B2C users that we do get, again, from a customer centricity perspective, a lot of these people are completely happy to buy on their own and are sized right in what they're buying. Like, that's the right solution for them. And so I think you have to then filter through all the people who you shouldn't talk to at all the people who maybe you should talk to, but you don't need to talk to, and really find that kind of Goldilocks of like, they're the right size, they're not fully using it the way that they should, and it's worth us having that conversation. That's a lot of data to get through for 8 salespeople to figure out. And so that's where we've used tools like ScaleStack and stuff to help us figure that out so that we can say, all right, has to be over this size company, has to be here for, we ask some of these questions, right? We know if you're here for work and we know what job you're here to do. So we have those, and then we can layer it with that other information that we can get externally about them. And then we can layer that with what we know of our own historical close rates and trends. And that can be what that AI tooling can kind of help us surface up as like, hey, this one you shouldn't miss talking to this one right into, not going into the queue for the salesperson at all.
Love it. If I could recap what I heard from you, I've learned so much. One funnel, the concept of a unified go-to-market is hard to do, but it starts with a covenant across the team that you at Typeform and your teammates are going to align around customer centricity. You're going to create a common lexicon, vocabulary, and shared goals, and a regular cadence that is interactive and call and response. But it evolves and morphs, and it's almost like, did I understand you correctly? Did I hear that right? And is this aligning back to customer centricity? And from that, the tooling, the stack, the decisions evolve and come. And when the day comes, like you're scoring, you're enriching, you're prioritizing the highest propensity leads and enabling that buyer to buy that, a human shouldn't get involved with, but the highest propensity leads are scored and prioritized and sent to a sales assist motion where they get the context and they can give that prospect and future customer a really guided experience. Did I get that right?
Yeah, great. You summed it all up. Could have been 5 minutes.
Done. Well, I've learned so much from you today, Kristen. I wish you the best of luck on your road show about one funnel. The world, you need a shout from the rooftops. All companies should be doing this. It makes complete sense. I've really enjoyed learning how you've adapted your funnel and really aligned the team around this vision with Kim and you're focused, like for the sales assist motion. It's fascinating to learn you have 8 sales reps and 8 customer success reps, but you're giving them less leads, but that are highest propensity with the context that matters, so they can reach out with intentionality and reward your prospects. So, any final thoughts you had from the conversation that you want our audience to take away from this?
I think just building that really strong cross-functional partnership, like that's the one you need to go fight for with your product leader. And if you're not centralized with your revenue team, with your marketing counterpart or whatever, everything else will come. A lot of this will come from that relationship you build. And so assuming there's mostly leaders on this call, like that's as important in your job as hitting your numbers and everything else. Like that relationship is so critical.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you to everybody that's listening in. Thank you, Kristen, for educating us about Typeform's one funnel unified go-to-market strategy. And it was great to chat with you today. And I'll see everybody on the flip side next month. Kristen, talk soon. Good luck in your travels.
Thank you. Thanks. Cheers.